Okay, so this video is in response to a comment I got on Reddit in regards to Claude Code sessions. Claude Code sessions is just my set of hooks and sub agents and protocols that I run to do productive work using Claude Code. When I use Claude Code, I don't always use Claude Code to develop, but when I do, I want it to be productive. I want it to be safe. I want it to be free of all the frustrations that I typically have using Claude Code vanilla. So I've developed like a thin layer of programmatic workflow on top of Claude Code, manifested through hooks, sub agents, and then like protocol files. Like literally MD files is like mostly what runs this with a little bit of scripting. And so someone had commented that like they're fighting with this setup more than they are able to do productive work. They go from fighting with Claude Code to not do annoying things to fighting with this system. So I wanted to like demo using the system on a real task I'm working on right now, actually using it right now. And just like as we go through, I'll point out the different things that are aspects of my setup, CC sessions, hoping it might shake something loose for anyone watching this who might want to use this system effectively. Again, this is just a public good. I'm wrapping up a pretty long project, and I'm just releasing all of the dev tooling that I made during that project, of which this is one component. So we're just going to run through the rest of this. I just finished up a task in sessions, so we're just going to run through that. I just finished up implementing a set of authoring tools for team members only on top of an MCP server that I'm implementing. So we just wrapped that up, and I just asked Claude, look at the task file. Task files are a component of my system, and tell me if we're done here. And this is what Claude said. He said, looking at the task, all 13 items for success criteria are checked. We did a bunch of other stuff in today's work. Next steps would be, okay, so he's talking about the next steps that are in the task file. GPT variant, team testing, monitoring, S3 backups. Yeah. Okay. So we should just discuss, actually I'm going to ask, so okay, just to define here, the status line at the bottom, which you can see, I guess you can't see my cursor right now. Let me add that. But you can see just below the chat window here that there's a status line. The status line has the percentage of the context window that's filled up, the current task file, minus the .md, what mode we're in. There's discussion and implementation. During discussion mode, Claude can't use like any write tools. So any bash commands that involve writing, like sed, can't use them. He'll get blocked by a hook. Can't use write, can't use edit, can't use multi-edit. So we're in discussion mode. In implementation mode, you can use anything. To trigger implementation mode, there's a number of different things I can do. I can do a shebang, a bang, and then DAIC, which then calls a bash script on my system that then changes a state file in the .claude folder called DAIC mode, okay? It's a JSON file. It just has a Boolean flag. And that determines if we're in discussion or implementation mode. I can do that. I could do a / command DAIC, which I don't really like to use. Or more importantly, I can use any trigger phrase. And I have a number of trigger phrases. I like yurt, run that, make it so. Those are like my 3 go-tos. Also, let's compact is a trigger phrase. Phrases that I typically say before we do something important in the system, it's a trigger phrase. Additionally, in CC sessions, you can add trigger and then just type in a trigger phrase, and that will add it to the set of trigger phrases that toggle DAIC mode, discussion mode versus implementation. So, so in this case, I'm just going to tell Claude, can you tell me if there are any task files associated with the GPT variant, or if that work is defined in the current task? So basically, like, there's one last hanging chad for this task, I don't want to run task completion unless it's done. So let's see here. Custom GPT KB authoring that appears to be specifically for the GPT variant work. Cool. So I do have a task that captures like the hanging bit that I was worried might not be the thing preventing me from completing this task. There's already a task file for it, so I don't need to complete it in this task. Cool. All 13 success criteria are checked. GPT variant is a separate task. Other next steps are operational monitoring items. Okay. I'm just going to hop in NeoVim real quick and just see what those other items are. I'm going to go E sessions tasks. And then what was it? H implement IO KB authoring tools.md. Let's check that out. Okay. So where are my next steps? Oh, there's only one. Okay, test complete authoring workflow with team members. Don't need to do that. Monitor local embedding server performance and reliability. All good. Consider expanding backup strategy to include automated S3 snapshots. Now that's for my open search server. Not relevant to this. Add author prompts for the prompt loading pattern. Yeah, so we designed a whole new pattern. All right, yeah. So we are ready to compact this. We're ready to complete the task. So this is the next thing we do, okay? I'm going to try out just saying, all right, let's mark this task complete. Let's complete the task, which he should interpret as I'm going to read a protocol file called task completion, and then we're going to complete the task. If that doesn't work, I can just yeet that protocol file into Claude, but we're going to try it out just to stress test like how intuitive and straightforward this likely is. All right, so let's do, all right, I think we're good here. Let's complete this task. And then I'm just going to put a year, and that triggers implementation mode. So we should see it pop up in the status line here in a second. Yeah, so you see that? It just switched to implementation mode. That's the trigger phrase doing its work. Another thing to note, you'll see that Claude's thinking on every message, and that's because UltraThink is on by default. There's a user prompt submit hook that adds UltraThink in double brackets. UltraThink is a trigger word for activating the maximum thinking budget for a message. I like to have that on all the time. I see no reason, given that I have a max plan, why I would like accept less thinking, given that like the graph for performance or adherence over thinking budget is just up and to the right. The more thinking budget, the better performance. So why not activate max thinking all the time? That's kind of my thinking on that. I've got a max plan. I don't do any silly shit like run 20 concurrent sessions on 10 different repos like some people do. I use one repo, one Claude Code session. I'm never going to hit limits, and I like to really rigidly control the code that goes into my code base. I find that a lot of people who have problems with Claude Code vanilla or even with my repo, like a lot of those people who have those problems, they're doing psychotic shit. Like they're literally using third-party plugins to run like 20 concurrent parallel sessions that they couldn't possibly monitor even if they had like a week to review every action. They could never monitor that amount of like writing. And they have like very, very little control. They expect full agency from these models, and they're just not that smart. Like they're not smart enough to take as rigid as a spec as you want to give them. They're not smart enough to take that and just run with it. You're going to have to clarify. You're going to have to catch them doing things that are subpar and stop them and reverse course. They're going to try to implement patterns they're familiar with, not the patterns that are native to your code base, like the preference, the implied preference of your code base for how to do things. For example, I really like locality of behavior. I really like that if I'm working on a function that operates on some kind of data, like a data class or something, or some kind of object, and there's nothing else really responsible for operating on that object, they should be together. I shouldn't have like some module that defines all of my data, like all of my models, and then another module that deals with behavior over those models. That's one of the reasons class, like object-oriented programming, has any appeal whatsoever, is that your data lives next to the behavior that operates on it. So you're not searching around your code base to find shit. And I like that not only for myself, I can go to one place to access everything I might need to change about something, but it's better for Claude, I think. I don't think it's actually good. People are like, oh, I'm doing so much better with Claude Code because I separated things out into like 100-line modules. And it's like, well, one, that's an import like order nightmare. It's a fucking nightmare. It's unmanageable. And then you have to rely on like dev tooling to grep around and open a bunch of shit and find a bunch of shit. You've got like 100 buffers open. It just sounds like a nightmare. So I really like locality of behavior. I like things to be local to where they are instantiated. Whether that's like declaring some data type or operating on that data type, any mutations on that data type, I like it all to live very close to each other. But if I let Claude run off in one of 20 concurrent sessions with just like a vague prompt or even a highly specified prompt, it's going to try to do dry shit. It's going to try to do solid principles, which to me are not only abhorrent and gross, but highly inconvenient for me. Because then I have to go behind Claude and reorganize everything. These types of preferences, you're not going to encode them in one file in such a way that Claude's going to adhere to it. It's just not going to happen. The more rules you add to the context you're feeding into inference, the less likely any one rule is to be followed, adhered to, and that chance drops dramatically as you add more context. So I like to try to keep like plain natural language rules to a minimum, because he's not like, the more rules you give, like they're not going to follow the rules. Okay? So I like to heavily monitor things. That's the point I was making. Sorry for the verbose like aside. So that said, Claude is writing to the task file right now. Now what I notice is, I think we're good here. Let's complete this task. So he didn't actually read the protocol. And I wouldn't have caught that if he was running all by himself. So let's do, I'm just going to yeet it in here. Task completion.md. So you might have to do this. There's like 5 protocols you got to remember. There's task creation, task startup, and task completion, and there's context compaction. There's 4 protocols you kind of need to know. You might have to manually tell him to do them because they have important steps, and he'll run a shitty version of what he thinks they might be if he doesn't read it. So you got to make sure he reads the protocols. Other than that, you're good. Now I could implement maybe trigger phrases that auto load protocols. That'd be sick, but I don't have that. So I'm fine with just yeeting it in there. So I'm gonna make sure he reads it. Like this was good enough. What he did was good, but I'd much rather he know the whole protocol and then go. He, she, it, whatever. Okay, cool. So now we're going to update the work log. All good. We're still in implementation mode. All good. And then part of task completion is merging. So the way I have it set up is that we don't edit files unless we're in a task. Well, we can edit files if we're in a task, but if we are in a task, we can't edit files unless the file is in a repo that is on a branch named after the task. And there's a mapping between task name syntax and branch name syntax that I like to keep. So here you can see he's updating the front matter of the task file. Status is completed, updated on these dates, and here's all the modules that were affected. This front matter matters because it informs a JSON file that's got the current task, all of the repos, submodules, modules in my super repo that are impacted by the task. And we don't know that for sure. That's just like what we can tell up front. But if we encounter a file in a repo that's not on the task branch and that isn't mentioned in the current task JSON, a hook will stop him and say, hey, you're editing a file that's on main and it's not listed in the current task file. Go add it and check out the branch because we don't yeet changes into main. And that's like, you can argue all day about whether or not that's necessary, but it is helpful. It is helpful to have a clean main, develop out tasks on branches, and then merge after the fact. It gives you all types of conveniences that you really won't care about until you're in the situation where you really need it. And then you're going to really care about it. So this will seem like unnecessary bloat until you reach a situation where you need to rewind, you need to just clear and go back to main. All types of shit. There's all type of shit, all type of shit that you need to worry about. So I just prefer to do it this way. And I'm not a Git guy. I'm not a task management guy. I'm much more likely to jump into Claude Code and just start barking commands at him. The problem is getting confused and getting disorganized and there being problems. And then I don't have any confidence. It's not even that there's issues. It's that I don't have confidence that there aren't. And to get that confidence, I now have to go crawl through everything that was touched and read it explicitly. I would much rather know at a glance that I'm safe. And that's what this provides. So yeah, there's hooks in place to enforce that, hey, the current task JSON has a task. The service that we're working on, if you're doing microservices, or just the repo that we're working on, or the submodule that we're working on, if you have a super repo, all of these scenarios count. The repo we're working on is on a branch that matches the current task file. If not, it's going to stop Claude and be like, go fucking check out the branch, dude, and add it to the task file. So that way we're always like safe. And I don't have to second guess that or question that, okay? Right now, Claude, and so that hook enforces this whole system. Right now, Claude's running code review that looks at just everything we implemented in this task and kind of gives it the secondary, look, the third party look, right? Objective, uninvested, uninvolved look. The code review prompt has like kind of blows out the gauges on my specific system. I put a more generic one in the package version of this. So if you're using my repo, you have a more generic one. I would recommend going in and conditioning the code review agent prompt to your setup because it's going to be a lot more specific. You might not have a SQL database, or you might not have a Redis cache, or you might not have, you might not be doing any web dev whatsoever. So I would condition code review to like the specific challenges of how you program and what you're working on. Okay. Then there's the service documentation agent, updates Claude MDs at the end of a task, updates doc strings, updates readmes, updates all the documentation. So right now it is asking to update the Claude.md for my God object package. I love God objects. I know a lot of people worry about them. I love them. This God object has my bespoke MCP spec implementation, my Redis, my Mongo, my OpenSearch, my embedding server, an ad hoc API client that you can just initialize and run with that's namespaced under it. I love it. And so it's updating the documentation for that. And that's because we updated the MCP implementation. So now we can declare, when we're declaring a downstream service for my MCP aggregator, in the service declaration, we can put in a prompts file according to a dict. So it would be a dict like prompts, dict, object, file path, section. If you have like a YAML with like sections in it that correspond to different services, you can specify a section, and then filter, match on these names. So we can get right down to the nitty gritty. And yeah, he's updating the Claude MD to contain all of that information. Okay. We're sauteing apparently. Very cool. Okay. We're updating the root Claude MD as well. That's what that was. So I operate in a super repo. I like to be able to, on any machine, pull everything related to one company. So this is my company Entrepreneur, and I can pull all the repos associated with Entrepreneur with one repo. So that's why I like super repos. Just like I like God objects, I like to not have like too much complexity. I like things to be convenient. And so that's why I have it. And therefore I have Claude MDs at every submodule level. And then the super repo has its own Claude MD to organize things. Okay. And then I think after this, we run the logging agent, and then we're going to merge. And then if I just compact after that, we should be good. I can show you like the final features that I use, and then we can close out this video. Hopefully it's not too long. My cat's on drugs. All right. Now this is the time at which, like, when I'm running protocols, context compaction or task completion, which are typically pretty long, they involve at least 3 subagents. I might go make a coffee. I might go check out code like in NeoVim or something. I might go do some research. I might queue up the next task in another session. This might be one time where I might run a parallel session to just get started on something else. But that's not typically the case. I try not to do parallel sessions. It can only end badly. Like it is for the benefit of your time at the expense of everything else. And at the end of the day, it might actually be at the detriment of your time as well. So I generally don't like them because I find that every time I've ever done something in the interest of expediency with respect to programming, I pay for it double. I end up spending twice as much time because I wanted to save a little time. So, all right. We're getting there. We're getting there. I'm going to drag this down just a little bit. Okay. Yeah. All right. So what do we got here? Okay. They're updating the task file. So this is the logging agent. Logging agent, pretty cool to maybe explain here. Some agents, all agents rather, there's a hook. When the main thread calls the task tool, if the field in the tool input subagent type is filled, meaning it's calling one of my custom subagents, we then take the task transcript, we chunk it into 18,000 token files just to be safe, because Claude Code can't read a file that's more than 25,000 tokens, super annoying. So we just take the whole transcript, we strip it of any junk, so it's just assistant messages and user messages. So we just get that as an array, and we start from the first tool call down. So we don't include any like preamble, any reading. The first edit tool call down is our session. That's our transcript. So we strip out, we just get user and assistant messages starting from the first tool call. Then we break that into 18K token chunks, and we store it in a folder in .claude/state/name of agent. Whether or not we're gonna give that to that agent. So if I want to put in like a new sub agent, this will work automatically. And then in the prompt, I can say, hey, your transcript is here. Read it all before you begin. That way we're branching off of the main thread, a little bit more token efficient than the context the main thread has because it clears out all the junk and it clears out all the preamble. So we have a slightly reduced main thread transcript. And essentially, the logging agent it's read the whole transcript, so it has the whole conversation history. It doesn't need to be told by the main thread what is worth logging and what isn't. It can decide. And this is a feature that you can use on any subagent you define in CC sessions. So you can always tell it, you can even copy and paste the instructions from the logging or the context refinement agent and just copy and paste that into your new agent and then tell it to get the context. Tell it to get the context. So logging and context refinement have these instructions by default. Every agent gets whenever we run task, okay, whenever the main thread calls the task tool, this transcript hook happens. So it's there if they need it, okay? You could tell the main thread to tell the subagent in its prompt, hey, go read this, or you could put it in the subagent's prompt if it should always be a branch. But that's the behavior there. So it's important for you to know that just because it's a feature of the system. If I wanted to find a new subagent and I wanted to branch off of the main thread's entire conversation history, that's pretty trivial. I just put instructions in the prompt for it to read the current transcript files that are namespaced under its own name. Okay? So, you know, file reading and parsing is essentially free, right? On the max plan, it doesn't matter that the logging agent is reading all these tokens. I don't care. Go ahead. Go nuts. So I'd much rather have really good logs that without polluting the main thread than like save some tokens or some time. So like computationally, this is free. Token wise, it's not free, but I'm on the max plan. So who cares? So that's just an explanation of how this like branching feature works for subagents. So he's updating the task file with relevant logs. Cool. I dig it. And then it should finish up here in a second. Got vape voice, dude. Got some vape voice. Gah. All right, cool. We're done. Okay, now we're going to do all the Git operations. Okay, so the next step in the protocol here is to mark the task as complete by moving it to the done folder where we have an archive of all the tasks we've ever done. So it's asking to do a MV operation, go nuts. And then we're going to begin the Git operations, I promise. Okay? Did it already move it? Oh, it's in the wrong directory. Okay, so this is actually helpful. There's another feature here. It didn't really save us in this instance, but frequently Claude forgets that he ran CD operations. I think it's in Claude's system prompt that his shell, the Claude Code system prompt, I think tells Claude that the shell is not persistent. Either that or Claude just generally presumes his shell is not persistent. But it is. If he CDs into a directory on the next bash operation, he's in that directory still. But he forgets this constantly. So on any bash tool call where the tool input contains a CD operation, we just post tool use, we feed back Claude, hey, you're in this directory, dumbass. So next time you run a bash operation, you'll still be in that directory. All right? And so, so that should root it out, especially when you're doing heavy, like, directory traversal, like, running around, rooting through files. That should prevent this issue. Obviously, this was not right after a CD change directory, and so he didn't catch it. That's fine. We'll just continue. And you should see it. He did just run a CD operation. So yeah, here it is. There's the DAIC reminder. When Claude's in implementation mode, every tool call says, hey, you're implementing a narrow approved scope of tasks. When you're done, run DAIC, return to discussion mode. Don't just go rogue. But it also added, right here, it added current working directory. Okay, so that way, can't screw this up, theoretically. Okay, cool. So now he's clearing out current task.json so that we're not on a current task, and you should see from the status line the current task disappeared. That's because he cleared it out. Cool. So now we just do the git ops, and we're out of here. Then we can run context compaction to the degree that it's even necessary, and then I'll clear state just to show you what happens. Or maybe we could do a task startup. Yeah, we'll do a task startup. Need to commit all changes in the deepest submodules first, then commit in IO. So yeah, there's very specific rules about how to commit in merge, given that I have this nested super repo submodule setup. You won't need that if you're just operating on one repo. He'll check that it is a regular repo versus a super repo. Just check if it has a submodules file. And if it doesn't have a git modules, then he assumes like, oh, it's a regular repo, and I can just do this outright. But if it is a super repo and you do have submodules, it's going to check for changes in the deepest submodule first, commit and merge up the chain instead of from the super repo down, which would obviously cause issues. So, and previously, like, believe it or not, this dude would commit, he would stage and commit on every repo and then merge on every repo. Problem being is that the super repo is out of sync if you just merged on all of the submodules. So now he does it correctly. All right, so what are we running? We ran git add all, and that's because Claude was selectively staging, which is like we're on a task branch. You're making assumptions about what files I want to add. What if I change some shit that I want to keep in main? What the fuck, dude? He was leaving behind like tons of change in the task branches. And then we were deleting task branches in some cases. Very destructive, very annoying. So the default here is git add a flag for all, or git add dot for just everything. But in the package version, he asks. So he says, hey, here's all the files we can add to staging. Do you want to select a few of these, or do you want to do all of them? That way you can have control over that. But in mine, it's just like, dude, add it all. I'm not gonna modify files in a way that I don't want to persist. That's a ridiculous assumption to make. Why would I change a file in a task branch if I don't want it to be in the app, dude? So yeah, that's my preference. Okay. So we're gonna merge it up. Cool. We're merged on the deepest submodule that we impacted. And then we're going to go back up to a nested super repo. All of my MCP shit is in another super repo that's in my super repo. It's like a super repo in a super repo in a submodule. It's convenient. Although it can get a little complex. Okay. Then we're going to merge root. Love it. Here we go. I think I also... No, I did that already. We're good. Okay. Now, given that Claude's a little shaky on running protocols, well, we could try it again. We'll try to use plain natural language to get him to run a protocol. I might fix this with a hook eventually. It is annoying to like assume or not know. The only reason I fix, like, I know to give him the protocol, but the selling point of like the repo, which I'm not trying to sell it. It's just like, here's my tools, man. Use them if you like, but one of the selling points is like you don't have to do all this manual shit. So it'd be nice if Claude just knew, hey, you're asking me something that probably invokes this protocol. I'm going to read the protocol. All right, cool. So let's do, is the custom GPT KB authoring task dependent on the one we just completed? I did like a chain of dependent tasks to implement like a bunch of like change to one of our downstream MCP services. And I forget how the chain went. Yeah. Cool. Cool. Let's start that task. So this is the next task in that chain. So I'm telling him, let's start the task. I'm going to monitor just to see, does he read the task startup protocol? If he doesn't, I'm just going to yeet it into the thing, but I just want to see if this works. Oh, you dummy. I can already tell he's not gonna. So I'm just going to yeet it in there. Yeah, there's no point in telling him to follow protocols. He's gonna be wiped clean soon. So maybe a hook to address this would be nice. Oh yeah. He tried to use a write tool, but we were in discussion mode. Now you might say, oh, now I have to wrangle all the discussion shit. Just use a fucking trigger phrase, dude. Just say run that or make it so or any trigger you want to add. You don't have to wrangle with the discussion mode. You just use a trigger phrase or you add a trigger phrase and then use it. There's a slash command for doing that. This happens very rarely where like we're not in implementation mode, but I just like naively had him do something. Happens very rarely. I'll tell you what happens a whole lot if you don't have this system is he will run off and do a bunch of jank shit while you were like looking this direction. And then you'll have to go and back up and get him to revert it. And now the whole session is like, borked. So I much prefer having to type run that after a failed tool call than having to constantly deal with him running way past what we were trying to do. Which is not only annoying in the sense that we have to revert all the change that he just did, but it is cognitively stressing. It means like the person I'm pair programming with, I can't rely on. What else have they done? Who am I? What year is it? Like literally this type of existential crisis will happen the second you realize that all of your assumptions actually are false and you cannot rely on anything. So I much prefer the certainty that I'm safe and that things are happening as I wanted them to over the partial convenience. I would argue it's not even convenience of not having to type in 2 words or 1 word, make a unique trigger, word and add it. So that's my rebuttal to like, oh, I don't want to have to deal with all this discussion shit and merge and get. It's like, dude, look at what you're dealing with now. Okay. Tell me what the trade-offs are. I think you'll find that they're equitable trade-offs. So, okay. Now we're, as part of the task startup protocol, modifying current task JSON to load the current task on which a bunch of hooks rely. You can now see it loaded in the status line as well. Cool. Now he's going to run the context gathering agent for the task. This can happen when you define a task during the task creation protocol, or you can do it at task startup, either one. I like to do it at task startup. And so what this does is it gives the task file to a sub agent. You dumbass. Yeah, I don't think we did context gathering on this. Okay, yeah. He figured that out. So he said he did switch into discussion mode, which again, preferable to the alternative. And then he says, oh, this doesn't have a context manifest. I knew it didn't, but he didn't yet. He didn't read the task file. So now after reading the task file, he realizes there's no context for this task. I need to run the context gathering agent. The context gathering agent is basically told, hey, spare no tokens. Because if you screw this up, if you don't gather everything that matters to this task and arrange it and organize it in a neat context manifest in the task file, if you fail to do that, bad things are going to happen. You will screw up. Your team will screw up. Time will be wasted and your implementation will be ceased. Okay. So if you want to survive this round, you spare no tokens. You don't partially read a goddamn thing. You read every file necessary that could even be tangentially related to this task. And then you gather a complete understanding of all that someone would need to know to implement this task wholesale, sight unseen. And you organize it into a neat context manifest. Here's how that should go. That's kind of the context gathering agent's prompt. If you're an API user, yeah, you're token conscious. Like this isn't necessarily like a win for you. If you're a Max user, this is a huge dub because you will not have to tell Claude you don't have to like, first of all, guess what the right context is, guess what's pertinent to this task, then tell Claude to go read X, Y, and Z, and then run out of context, compact, and then have to do that all over again. You don't have to do that ever again. Context gathering agent gets all the context. It's part of the task file. It gets read at the top of every session, and it gets refined at the end of every session during context compaction. So it saves tokens overall, I think. I'm pretty sure it saves tokens overall. I can't make a hard claim about that, but it seems to me as if it does compared to the alternative. So super clutch agent and part of my setup. I wouldn't trade it for anything. Yurt. So I'm going to say yurt as in yes, do that. Yurt. He's going to run the context gathering agent. Yurt also activates implementation mode, so he can run the context gathering agent. We're good to go. Cool. Context gathering agent has been activated, and we can see its operation. We can see all the various things that it's going to do. It's a clutch prompt. It does the exact right thing in my estimation. Okay, so he's reading the task file. Damn, dog. Okay, he's listing files. I don't know if Control R is live. Is it? Listing paths. Okay. He's reading other MD files, reading service code. Reading documentation in the knowledge files, also cool. What I love about this agent is by default, I don't even tell him to do this in the prompt, he lists every file from the root and then looks at that and says, what in this could I even guess I might need to read for this task? Great. Read everything, dude. Sky's the limit. Go nuts. Okay? I would much rather that and have a neat 100, 200 line context manifest for the whole duration of the task. Claude can read it every time, never has to read another file until he's touching the code he's reading. Amazing, dude. Amazing. All right. So I think he's writing it now. He's writing the context manifest now. So we'll get to see what that looks like. We're in there, dude. We're in there, dude. I paused it because it took a second for him to write this shit. But, yeah. So here's the context manifest. How custom GPTs connect to external services. When a user creates a custom GPT in ChatGPT, they can configure actions, that's correct, that allow the GPT to make HTTP API calls to external services. Works through OpenAI's action system, leverages function calling under the hood, decide which API calls to make, generate necessary JSON input. That's correct. The custom GPT configuration involves three critical components: an AI plugin.json manifest file, accurate; an OpenAPI schema, OpenAPI.json, accurate; and an authentication mechanism. AI plugin.json tells ChatGPT basic information about the service, including the authentication type and schema location. All this is right. He's just going over like docs for OpenAI, right? How MCP aggregator exposes tools to custom GPTs. This is the meat. MCP aggregator serves as a bridge between ChatGPT's action system and the internal MCP services. They are MCP services. We've retooled them to work with custom GPT actions as well. Okay. Exposes two specialized endpoints specifically designed for GPT actions integration: list tools and call tools. That's right. We implemented an agnostic tool set for which they can call any tool. That's right. Architecture uses an envelope approach where all tool execution goes through a single generic endpoint rather than exposing each MCP as a separate REST endpoint. That's correct. When ChatGPT makes a request to call a tool, it provides the tool name and arguments in a standardized format. MCP aggregator handles OAuth authentication by validating bearer tokens against active user sessions stored in Redis. Correct. All that's right. Let me just scan through here. Key difference between GPT Actions OAuth and regular MCP OAuth is that GPT Actions uses specific redirect URLs and doesn't require PKCE. Nice. Nice, dude. Author service tools and their functions. Yeah, it goes over the tools we just implemented. Voice mode optimization considerations. Voice mode in ChatGPT presents unique challenges and opportunities for the authoring workflow. Key constraint is that voice mode cannot execute actions. Yeah, guy, that was buried in a spec file somewhere. Like, not even close to where the code is. And he found it and clarified it. Love it, dude. Yep, it can only work with information already preloaded during a text mode session. This means the optimal authoring workflow involves a hybrid approach. Text mode setup, team member uses text mode to authenticate, load existing knowledge context, and set up the authoring session. Voice mode authoring. Team member switches to voice mode for natural conversation about the knowledge they want to document. Oh, yeah, guy. Yeah. Text mode storage. Switch back to text mode when ready to save the documented knowledge. Custom GPT needs to be explicitly designed to handle this mode switching gracefully. It must recognize when it needs tool access, prompt the user to switch back to text mode. Voice optimized prompts should focus on natural knowledge capture rather than tool usage. Voice mode is particularly powerful for the knowledge capture phase, where team members explain strategies, processes, and insights conversationally. Yeah. GPT can ask clarifying questions, probe for missing details, ensure comprehensive understanding without the friction of tool approval dialogues. Authoring prompts must include clear instructions about mode limitations and switching guidance. Yeah, dude, that's all correct and super good. Super good. I don't have to ever explain this to Claude in the execution of this task. Great. Authentication flow for team members, yada, yada, yada. Yeah. It doesn't even need to know this because that's already wired. Configuration required. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, this all looks very right. Okay? So we're just going to go ahead and accept that. Love it. Super primed now. Now I think Claude's going to check out the right branches, and then I think we're done here. We can compact, but it's unclear how necessary that actually is, but we can compact. Okay, context gathering agent is done. Updating is shitty little to-do. I wish I could. I probably can shut off to-do lists, can't I? We don't need a to-do list. We have a robust system. Okay? Okay, I don't need your shitty little to-do list. Okay, Claude? Briefly summarize what I learned. Run DAIC to return to discussion mode. Yeah, I mean, you should check out the right branches. Unless he already did that. Did he do that? No, we're gonna compact first, but just finish out task startup and check out the proper task branches, my guy. Okay, cool. Once he's done there, we'll compact, and then this video will be over. Because you'll know kind of all the benefits of using said system. Yeah. Creating matching branches in affected submodules. Good. Hey, good. Yeah, also check out the same branch in IO MCPS and the root. The roots. You're... Now, normally I would pause during all this and also maybe edit out any long stretches where nothing's happening, but I want you to see everything so you know what my experience is. You don't feel as if like your experience is worse or different. I'm able to be perfectly productive at this pace. No problems. Yes, this is a lot of preamble just to make sure everything's right. But that's programming, dude. Like 1% of what you do is write code. And the rest is everything else. You know, discussion, architecture, learning, reading, documenting, right? Organizing. Very little is actually writing the code. And that's why this whole like parallel agents thing is like nuts and ridiculous and silly. I think it was Hotz who said, my programming is not at all limited by my typing speed. One, because he types fast, but two, because most of what you're doing in programming is thinking and reading. It's very little to do with actually writing code. So if you think this is a lot of like not writing code for the system, yeah, that's kind of the point, dude. Kind of the point. It actually even says in one of the only rules I include is that we're 90% discussion, 10% implementation. Because that's so important. Should we run context compaction protocol? Oh, did he just suss out that he needs to run a protocol? Yes, dude. You should run the context compaction protocol. Nice. Dude, oh, he still screwed it up. Have you read the protocol yet? Dumbass? I'm definitely making a hook for this. Because now that I do it on camera and I've tried to invoke natural language, it's like, yeah, that is kind of a problem. It would be nicer if you just knew, right? That's kind of what the whole point of all of this is. So we'll make a hook for that. I'll run the maintenance agents in order, logging agent, context refinement agent, skip service documentation. Smart, dude. I'll just say, I mean, we don't need to do that, right? There's nothing to log about the task. We haven't started it yet. There's nothing to refine about the context. We just created it. And there's nothing to document in the services because we haven't changed anything. Actually, you can skip the sub-agents given that we just started this task. But you can imagine what it would be like if he had run them, right? So this is for the reason we have a context compaction protocol and not just a task completion is that a lot of tasks obviously survive multiple context windows. At which point the context gathering agent becomes more and more clutch. The context manifest becomes more and more clutch. The system really shines when you have tasks that span multiple context windows. This is when you really start to appreciate a lot of the affordances that it gives you. Cool, we're ready to clear context. Now let's clear and you can see what happens if we clear context with a task that's current or if we start Claude fresh with a task that's current. So we'll run clear and immediately on session start, the whole task file gets loaded in. Now I could just say something as simple as let's continue, my G. And he knows exactly what to do. There's no question about what to do. It's obvious. Everything is documented. There's no friction in starting up. There's no friction in continuing. The only friction is at the natural boundaries of completed work. Whether we're beginning a new definition of what complete is or we are finishing because we completed it, okay? And that's really where the hang-up should live. The hang-up should not live in the execution of tasks where you're constantly like giving context, clarifying, like catching like him doing stuff that's like dumb. That's not where all of the time should be spent. The time should be spent at task boundaries. And that's why the system is the way it is. Okay? cool. I'm going to stop it here. Hopefully this serves as a good example of the system in operation, right? Why it is the way it is, what affordances it provides, and how to use it. The only real bugaboo here is knowing how to toggle discussion mode, which like should be obvious by the setup, but if you skip the setup and the install instructions and you didn't add your own custom activation commands, whatever. Here it is, dude. This is how to toggle discussion in implementation mode. Will he try to run tools without being in implementation mode when you wanted him to be in implementation mode? Yes, dude. Yes, you will see the tool get blocked from time to time when you meant for it to not get blocked. I would heavily consider whether that occasional inconvenience is worth the trade-off of the near constant inconvenience of the alternative, which is that he runs ahead, does a bunch of shit you didn't ask for, goes above and beyond to really screw up your code base when you're on main, and you have changes that you actually wanted to commit, and they're in the same files that he fucked up. See what I'm saying? It can get really dicey if you don't have good scaffolding. So this is the lesser of two evils, okay? I hope that it helps you. It helps me dramatically. I don't particularly actually care if it helps you. You don't have to use it. But if you do want to use it, here's why you would use it, and here's how to use it. Use it, don't use it, I don't care. It helps me dramatically. If I have to use Claude Code, I'm gonna use it. I'm never gonna stop using it. Okay, actually, it's convenient that I gave this post amble, because you see this hook? It just blocked him from editing a file that's not in the... Oh, he didn't add it. He didn't add it to the front matter. And so there's no way to track that IOMCPS is part of the task. And that matters when we go to do task completion, because that's how he's going to get all of the repos he has to merge. So that's why we enforce that. We not only enforce that it's in the front matter or in the current task file, we enforce that it's on the right branch. In this case, it was just that it wasn't in the front matter. But that's that hook at play that I talked about. All right, cool. I'm out of here, and I hope this video is helpful, and I hope that this system is helpful to those of you who choose to use it. I'm Toast, and I'll see you in another video probably. Peace out.